As the Ukraine war draws closer to the end of its fourth year, we've seen Ukraine's strategy evolve. Early in the war, Ukraine focused on defense. Russia attacked, Ukraine defended, and we would occasionally see counterattacks on Ukrainian territory. But now everything has changed. Ukraine is hitting Russia on Russian territory, while conducting strikes that Russia could never have seen coming. Many of Ukraine's strikes now come from the shadows, and that's exactly what's happened with Ukraine's most recent strike. Russia's Iron Snake has been decapitated as a group of Ukrainian partisans has just completed a pair of strikes that devastate Russian logistics. First, we take you to Yekaterinburg. Russia's fourth largest city and one of the country's main cultural centers, Yekaterinburg doesn't appear to be an obvious target for Ukraine. Sure, if Ukraine were going to follow the Putin playbook of launching strikes against civilian population centers, a city like Yekaterinburg would be high up on the list. But a city that is famous for its architecture and street art doesn't immediately strike anybody as a clear military target. But behind the cultural beauty of this Russian city lie many military secrets. Yekaterinburg is the home of the headquarters of Russia's Central Military District of the Armed Forces, meaning there is plenty of brutality hiding among the beauty. But more importantly, as is the case with every other major Russian city, Yekaterinburg is the home of a large network of railways that Putin's forces have been using to transport troops and equipment both throughout the Russian motherland and into Ukraine. It was the rails that Ukraine targeted in its most recent strike. On September 17th, the Kyiv Post reported that the Artesh guerrilla movement has claimed responsibility for sabotaging a railway junction close to the city of Yekaterinburg. That sabotage was announced in a statement published on the group's Telegram channel, and it came with a stark warning. All military logistics of Russia are under threat. The Artesh group detailed how it carried out the strike in its Telegram post. Amidst pictures shared of the flaming wreckage of rail equipment, the group said, "Artesh has paralyzed a railway junction near Yekaterinburg, threatening Russia's entire military logistics. Our agent carried out sabotage on the railway near Yekaterinburg, damaging relay equipment. This disrupted train traffic in all strategic directions." The Kyiv Independent followed up on this report, noting that an agent from the Artesh group, which is a partisan group founded in Ukraine, penetrated a part of Russia that is about 1,000 miles away from Ukraine's border. There, they set fire to a relay cabinet in an effort to disrupt rail traffic to and from Yekaterinburg. That relay cabinet was one of many that's installed across the 4,440-mile Sverdlovsk railway line, which runs for much of the width of Russia. This junction was used to supply ammunition, armored vehicles, fuel and personnel to the front, as well as to factories and warehouses in the north and east, Artesh said in its Telegram statement. Now military trains are idle, causing damage to the army's rear. And that's the point of this type of attack. Relay boxes aren't the most difficult piece of equipment to fix, and Russia will likely have the box up and running again fairly soon. But while that box is in flames, Russia's military trains can't complete the journeys they're scheduled to complete. That results in delays. These delays may mean that equipment doesn't reach Russia's soldiers in Ukraine, which can have one of two effects. Either Russia's soldiers have to hold fire on their assaults, giving Ukraine's defenders much-needed breathing room, or Russia commands its weakened soldiers to attack anyway, making them easy pickings for Ukraine. Artesh also mentions that the junction it targeted is also part of a network that delivers components and weapons to and from Russia's military warehouses and factories. Again, we see the issues of delays rearing its ugly head for Russia. When deliveries are held up because a relay station isn't working anymore, factories can't produce weapons that Russia's troops need in Ukraine. In addition to supplies of ammunition and armored vehicles drying up because the trains carrying those supplies are slowed down, factories not producing ammo and equipment lead to even more supply chain challenges down the line. This was a very intelligent attack by Artesh, so intelligent that it was the second such act by the partisan group in a matter of days. On September 14th, Artesh operatives were doing something very similar, this time in the DECAPITATED district of Russia. Again, the target was a relay station, which the group says was located close to the village of Sadovoy, which is between the Sadovoy and Erkan-Shakar railway stations. Artesh wasn't shy about proclaiming the success of this strike, either. Just as with Yekaterinburg, the group took to Telegram to share pictures and videos of what it had accomplished. In addition to sharing the coordinates of the relay station strike on Telegram, Artesh wrote, "This railway line is used to transport ammunition and military equipment from industrial plants in the North Caucasus to the Rostov region, and then to the front in Ukraine." The group also explained the specific supplies that were stopped in their tracks, literally thanks to the strike. The sabotage disrupted train service, delaying the delivery of ammunition for MLRS, or multiple launch rocket systems, and tube artillery, equipment undergoing repairs, and personnel being deployed. There's obviously a pattern here. Ukraine is targeting the Russian supply chain because it knows that the weaker this chain becomes, the weaker Russia's assaults in Ukraine become. Targeting a rail line responsible for moving artillery and MLRS is also a good idea because both are weapons that Russia uses extensively to attack Ukraine. That was especially the case earlier in the war, when Russia outmatched Ukraine's artillery capability by a staggering 10 shells to each one that Ukraine could fire. With the advantage being cut to 2-1 as of February, Russia's artillery has been a useful tool that Putin has commanded to raze several Ukrainian cities to the ground. Take away Russia's explosive firepower before it can even reach Russia's forces, and once again, Russia's assaults become weaker. So we've seen 2 strikes in the space of 4 days, both carried out by the same partisan group that appears now to be operating deep inside Russian territory. Surely Russia wouldn't be able to deny that these strikes were happening. The evidence is as clear as day, as we see the flaming wreckages of relay boxes being shared on Artesh's Telegram channel. Come on, if you thought Russia was going to acknowledge these attacks, then you haven't been paying attention to how the Russian propaganda machine works. As is almost always the case, unless Russia believes it can turn a Ukrainian strike into an opportunity to paint itself as the victim, the approach has been to deny, and deny again with these latest rail strikes. That's according to News Sky, which says that Russia has followed its usual strategy of attempting to explain away the flaming wrecks of sites that Ukraine hits. Official Moscow is trying to downplay the sabotage by explaining the delays as breakdowns or accidents, the outlet reports. However, operational reports in hundreds of private logistics chats, data on massive inspections, road control, and a surge in repairs at key sites confirm that this is not an isolated failure, but a real resistance movement. Russia isn't necessarily trying to hide Ukraine's successes from the rest of the world. It knows the West isn't going to fall for its propaganda when presented with the evidence of what really happened. However, it is attempting to hide the evidence of what Ukraine achieves from its own people. That's why the message from Russian authorities to their people is to only trust official sources and not pay attention to whatever they might read or hear online. To aid its people in their compliance, Russia has also started implementing internet blackouts, especially when Ukrainian drones are flying overhead. Russia tries to claim that these blackouts are designed to aid Russia's air defense systems. The real reason they're happening is because Russia wants to prevent footage of Ukraine's strikes from leaking online, and it definitely wants to prevent its own people from accessing that footage. These blackouts don't affect groups like Artesh. They can take photographs and videos before moving on to a location where they can connect to Telegram and share their evidence with everybody else. That doesn't stop Russia from attempting to deny that strikes ever took place, but it's enough to show anybody watching what really happens when relay stations along some of Russia's more important railway lines go up in flames. These aren't accidents, they are successful Ukrainian strikes. It gets even worse for Russia. Artesh has been very busy over the last week or so, as these 2 strikes against the Russian railway network aren't the only things the partisan group's been up to. On September 11th, the Kyiv Post reported that Artesh operatives had also carried out a sabotage operation at the Sheglovsky Val plant, which is in the Russian region of Tula. This strike targeted a facility that Russia uses to manufacture its Pantsir S air defense system, along with prototypes of next-generation armored vehicles, the outlet reports. Artesh destroyed a communications tower at the facility. Granted, this likely won't slow down production. However, the sabotage sent a message to Russia that Ukraine has people operating all over its territory. And in the Telegram statement announcing the strike, Artesh said something that has proven prophetic. Now we are moving to more active actions and destroying the infrastructure of the enterprise, and this is just the beginning. Artesh wasn't lying. It's carried out 2 more strikes since the sabotage in Tula, and Russia will now be wondering what the group is planning to do next and what, if anything, Russia can do to stop it. Let's focus on Artesh itself for a moment. Typically, our reports on Ukraine's strikes inside Russia see us talking about Ukraine's intelligence or security services, which are often involved in the planning and execution of these kinds of attacks. That's not the case with Artesh. The group isn't officially part of Ukraine's military, as it's a partisan group that is acting independently, though with the same ultimate goal as Ukraine's official military. That's the entire idea of partisan groups. They occupy a somewhat grey area between paramilitary forces and civilian vigilante groups, which is fine for Ukraine and absolutely terrible for Russia. After all, how do you catch members of a group that has no official military connections? Partisans operate underground and away from prying eyes, often working directly in enemy territory. There are many of these kinds of Ukrainian partisan groups operating both in Russia and the occupied territories of Ukraine. The insider says that these types of unofficial groups may work independently of Ukraine's military, but they likely receive intelligence and resources to help them carry out their sabotage operations. Kyiv openly admits that a vast network of Ukrainian security agents operates in Crimea and other occupied regions of Ukraine, the outlet says. It is unlikely that the guerrillas carrying out these actions, which have included spotting for Ukraine's missile strike on the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Crimea, prepared for them without the assistance or even direct involvement of professionals. Ukraine's partisans are valuable tools in a war where Ukraine's military is willing to use every last bit of help that it can get. And Artesh in particular has proven itself among the most useful of these tools. The Week wrote a profile on the group in 2024 where it claimed that Artesh's ability to operate in secret is a large part of its success. In the few interviews that Artesh members offer, the group has provided interesting insight into what they do. For example, the recent strikes conducted against Russian relay stations may not have been carried out by Ukrainian members of Artesh. The group appears to be operating an online course that teaches anybody who enrolls how to destroy Russian equipment. The group says that 4,000 Russian soldiers have taken this course, meaning Artesh may have a small army of saboteurs operating inside Russia and on the Ukrainian battlefield. Russia's state security service, the FSB, is on the hunt for Artesh members. The Week says that a report by The Times revealed that Russia's agents have turned whole villages inside out in their search for the partisans. Mass detentions and wanton violence against anybody who these Russian agents deem to be suspicious is becoming the norm, showcasing that Artesh and other partisans live dangerous lives in service of making the Ukraine war winnable for their country people. Despite the risks, Ukraine's partisans will carry on their campaign. Russia will suffer as a result, which brings us back to the pair of rail junction strikes Artesh just carried out and what they might mean for the future of the Ukraine war. Let's start with Artesh's target, Russia's railway network. Though we do need to temper this with the acknowledgement that Artesh only took out a pair of relay boxes, the partisans chose to hit Russia's rail because it's vital to everything that Russia does. That doesn't just go for the Ukraine war. Russia relies on rail far more than any other industrialized nation, for everything from transporting people to shipping goods and cargo across its vast landmass. CNA, which is a non-profit research and analysis organization, made that point very clear in a written report by senior research fellow Emily Ferris. More so than any other military, Russia's ground forces rely on its expansive railway network to move troops and materiel across the country, for training exercises in peacetime and to mobilize and sustain troops in war theaters, Ferris said. She also points out that Russia's rail network spans over 85,000 kilometers, or about 53,000 miles, and that it covers every part of the country from the Far East port city of Vladivostok to the isolated exclave of Kaliningrad. Russia needs these rails because the country's sheer size and awkward geography make transporting anything over distances via road or sea more difficult than it is for other nations. Russia spans 11 time zones, and many of its ports freeze over during the winter. The railways are essential. Without them, Russian logistics, both civilian and military, break down. Writing for the International Center for Defense and Security in December 2024, Kasper Sukand makes a similar point. He dubs Russia's railway network the Iron Leviathan, as a play on both its sheer size and the lethality that this railway network delivers to Russia's enemies. Sukand says that Russia has invested heavily in its rail infrastructure since Putin launched his campaign of aggression in 2014 because it's very aware that such a vast network is vulnerable. How could it not be? No country in the world has the ability to guard every single important piece of infrastructure required for a 50,000-mile-plus railway network. Ukraine is well aware of this vulnerability, and it knows that crippling Russia's rail network could be the key to taking down Putin's entire war machine. Some of Russia's rail targets are more valuable than others. In September, Defense News revealed that a report by the US-based Hudson Institute has found 8 high-value targets across Russia, including several rail-based targets that, if hit, could cripple Russia's war machine. While a single strike against any one of those targets would not by itself constitute a decisive blow, cumulatively, a sustained attack against several of them could significantly damage Russia's military infrastructure and complicate its continued aggression, the Hudson Institute says. Those targets include a canal that connects the Caspian and Black Seas, a drone factory, and, critically, a bridge that connects Russia to occupied Crimea and 3 others that link occupied Crimea to occupied Kherson Oblast, all of which it says that Ukraine should target. Obviously, the Artesh group didn't hit any of these major targets. It doesn't have those kinds of capabilities. But even if by attacking relatively minor pieces of Russia's rail infrastructure, the group shows Russia that Ukraine is both aware of the vulnerability of Russia's rail network and is capable of exploiting that vulnerability when Russia least expects it. Ukraine has hit Russian rail many times before these most recent strikes. As News Sky points out, the attack near Yekaterinburg is no longer an isolated incident. Earlier in September, partisans blew up relay devices near Rostov, in Karachay-Cherkessia, Kostroma, and on the Trans-Siberian Railway. None of these attacks is enough to take out an entire rail network the size of the one that Russia operates, but these strikes cause delays, often for multiple days, that can lead to everything from fuel shortages to disruptions among Russia's forces on the front lines in Ukraine. Speaking of those frontline soldiers, News Sky adds that they rely on Russia's rail network for 80% of the supplies that they receive. Again, this highlights how essential rail is to the Russian military machine. Causing delays on even one branch of Russia's rail network impacts deliveries being conducted almost everywhere. Russia has to keep adapting to its plans on the fly, perhaps even rerouting supplies intended for one location to another rather than ensuring both locations are properly supplied. It's all about snatching control away from Russia. When Russia can't control the flow of soldiers, equipment, and ammunition to Ukraine, it also can't control the strength of its assaults. Ukraine then takes advantage, either by launching counter-offensives against Russian troops that are waiting for their delayed supplies, or by taking out those forced to attack without the equipment needed for their assaults. Russia is now dealing with guerrilla warfare. This isn't a new concept for Putin. Ukrainian guerrillas operate in many occupied cities and regions that Russia occupies and is currently assaulting. But now he knows that the Artesh group and perhaps several others are operating on Russian territory. They're turning Putin's soldiers against him, and they're targeting the vital arteries in the Russian circulatory system that keep everything in the country flowing. If the rails go down, Russia follows. And right now, it doesn't seem like there's anything that Putin, the FSB, or the Russian military can do about Ukraine's rail infrastructure attacks. While Russia is trying to figure out what it can do about Ukraine's attacks on its rail infrastructure, it also has a major problem in Ukraine itself. Putin failed to capture one city that he made a key objective in his summer offensive, and now Ukraine crushes Russia at Pokrovsk while Putin's troops flee in panic. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of Ukraine's campaign against Russia's rail network. And thank you as always for watching.